Hello, every pony. I am here today to show you the basics of the program Paint Tool Sci. Now, the version I use is Paint Tool Sci version 2, and what I'm going to be showing you are the basics of it. I don't have the most current version of Sci 2, so what I have may not match up with the way your program works, if that is the program you use. But this could also work for Sci 1. And what you first want to make yourself familiar with would be the options at the top, such as File, New, Open, Create Canvas from Clipboard. New, of course, gets you a new canvas. I have my unit of measurement set to pixels, and I have my default set to 2000 by 2000 pixels. Other than that, you'll familiarize yourself with opening files. Right now I only have this in my folder. There's also Create Canvas from Clipboard, which is basically what you have on your clipboard, what you have copied or cut. You can make a canvas that just shows that. Now, if you copy something from a file with multiple layers, you will only get what is on the one layer you copied it from. What to know is also under Edit. There's Cut, Copy, Paste. You should be familiar with that if you're working with art. If not, Cut basically takes what is selected and puts it on your clipboard while taking it away from the canvas. Copy does exactly that, but it leaves it there. Paste, of course, puts it on your canvas free for you to move. Canvas lets you change your canvas resolution, which changes the measurement of all sides. So right now it's 2000 pixels wide and 1500 tall. If I change it to 1000 wide, it'll change to 750 tall in pixels. Now, if you go to change canvas size, that'll let you change its overall size, not just keeping it scaled the way it is currently. And you can go to extension for each side and add your own custom amount of pixels to each end of your canvas. Like top, I'll add 500 pixels and you get this. And as you can see, I also use this button right here to center the canvas and zoom out enough for the whole thing to be visible. You can zoom in as much as you want, up to 3200%, and you can zoom out up to 0.78% depending on the size of the canvas. Underneath the scale, you'll find Angle, which lets you rotate the canvas. The square button that's next to it, of course, does almost exactly the same thing as the other one. These buttons just turn it their own custom sizes. Apart from that, you can go to Reverse Canvas Horizontal, which will reverse what you have on your canvas. You can rotate it 90 degrees, whether it be clockwise or counterclockwise. Background in Sci 2 lets you change it to transparent bright checker, transparent dark checker. It lets your background be black, white, any color you want. I usually use white myself unless I need something with a transparent background. Underneath layer, I don't actually use this much myself. When I work with layers, actually, I'll show you this. You create new layers by pressing on this button that looks like a page with a folded corner. If you want a new line work layer, which is its own type of layer with its own tools, you use the pen, and it basically stabilizes your line work. And if you want to further stabilize it without using a line work layer, you can use the stabilizer up here. 1 would be the smallest number to use other than 0, and it's not showing up on mine because of my new tablet, but it would look chunkier if you used it on its lowest setting. If you used it on its highest, your pen will move slower, but it will be much smoother. I currently use mine on around 13 or so. Here you can create a layer folder, and with the folder you can create new layers to move around all together. Like, I have this sketch, I'll add a circle, I'll add another circle. If you move the layer, or the folder with the layers, you'll move it all at once. So that's what you get with the layer option up here. Selection, you can, first you have to select something. I'll circle this. Selection, I can deselect, which means you're no longer selecting it. I can invert selection, which selects everything except for what you had selected before. You can dilate selection. In Sci1, it only lets you do this 1 pixel at a time. In Sci2, you can increase it up to 25 pixels at a time. But what this does is increases the area of your selection. In Sci2, you can also erode selection, which does exactly the opposite. You can dilate selection 1 pixel, which is available in Sci1, and erode 1 pixel, which is not available in Sci1. In Sci2, you have the option of a ruler. Now, I'm actually, funny enough, not aware of how to change the straight ruler yet. Besides moving it, you hold down Control and you can move it wherever you want. You can change it to ellipse, which is the circle. And if you draw with that on your screen, it will line the circle. You can increase the size by holding down Shift and reaching out to the other part of the canvas. You can move it around by holding down Control and moving it wherever you want it. Control also lets you change the shape of this circle as much as you want in any direction, taking into account perspective. Now you can reset the ruler if you need to. You can hide it if you want to. And then that brings you to filter, color adjustments. You have hue and saturation. Hue is not so visible in this, so I will give you a colored piece. This lets you change the hue of your selection. Saturation changes the saturation, of course, which is the scale of gray to how bright the color is. Luminance changes it from whiter to blacker, lighter to darker, but without taking into account the brightness, because added brightness will increase the saturation and make it closer to white. Meanwhile, luminance only makes it closer to white. It will become desaturated if you bring it closer to black. I know for a fact. So, we'll check out brightness and contrast. Brightness keeps the saturation up as much as possible. And when you go dark, it is almost as if you are using the layer function of shade or burn, what it used to be called in Photoshop, still is actually, but it makes your color darker and still more saturated. Contrast. Contrast would be the difference in your art between black and white. Contrast makes it brighter or grayer. Depth, I actually can't define it as well as I can saturation, but it is very, very similar to saturation in terms of making it gray and then making it deeper. So after filter, we have view. With view, this just allows you to change the settings the way this does. After view, we have window, which allows you to change the mode, it seems, and the way Sci looks to you when you use it. So, show brush size circle for brush tools. You see, when I do this, there's a circle around my brush. Now, with window, I can change that. and it no longer appears, if that makes it easier on you to focus on it. I personally like using it. There's use dot cursor for brush tools, which seems to get rid of the dot. There's an option for full screen. I personally favor all of my business on the right side of the screen. When you download the program, it is by default on the left side of the screen. You can change this and even make it whatever way you want under Window. Now, getting into these tools, on the right side for me, for you, it'll probably be on the left side. You can change it depending on what you want. This first option, tool, is the selection tool. It will tell you, I guess it won't tell you if you hover over it, but it selects a box depending on what size you want to make it. And underneath it, underneath all of your brushes, it tells you your options. Freeform, you can change it as you like. You can resize it. You can deform it when you want to change the proportions of a sketch or something. You can even rotate it as much as you want. And you're able to flip it horizontally. You can flip it vertically. You can rotate it 90 degrees. And of course, to undo all of this, you can press Ctrl and Z at the same time. This is basically the freeform tool for selection. It allows you to select whatever area you draw out, and you can move it if you select this tool right here, the crosshair. You can also do that with this tool, but this tool will select a square shape. This is the selection tool. It allows you to select parts of your canvas depending on your settings. My selection mode is currently on transparent area, which means all that is on this layer are these lines. And because of that, everything else is transparent. I can do similar colored area, which honestly I don't like a lot unless you're using pixels, because the smoothness of the selection is not as smooth as when you select transparent area. All similar colored pixels. I think this is exactly the same as the last one. When you go to select your area, you can also select it for current layer. I will close this space to show you. It will select a closed area if your lines close, and the range of transparency means if it's lower, it will give you more leeway with the pixels around it. If it's higher, you will need thicker lines for it to stay in your selection area. So if your lines are very thin, such as this, the smallest brush, you see this thin circle. Now, if it were at 0, it would select within the circle. If I have it at 150, it will not select in the circle because there are not enough pixels blocking the way. After that, we have specified layer, which honestly I think is the same thing as current layer, because to have the layer specified, you need to be on it. Merged image takes into account every single layer in the file. And I will show you. This is a separate layer, and here's a line. Merged image selects that. If I have it to current layer, it only takes into account the red line, which is the only thing on this layer. And that is the basics of what you get with the selection tool. The selection wand, I guess it would be. And this would be the polygon tool. You make your own shapes with it, I see. And I guess by default the only options are circle, triangle, and square or rectangle. In Sci 2, you have these two options, which is the shape and then text. With text, you can change the font. You can change the size as long as your text is selected. You can change the size to almost whatever you want. And I should have specified above these tools, you have your color wheel. You can change this to include whatever you want that is available up here. I personally only use the color wheel. You can have swatches of all sorts. You can have your own colors. You can have your own palettes selected. I'm actually not sure how to get it on there because I don't use that. It would be much more helpful to someone using a set palette, however. And this is pretty helpful if you're looking to see what your brush will look like. And you can clear it. You can change the brush size. You can go to Window, and under Window it says Show User Interface Panel. These are all different things you can display, and these are all the options that are listed over here. Scratch pad, you can use whatever brush you want in here to see what it will look like before you actually draw on your canvas. And if you don't want to go back to Window, you can just press up here again to get rid of this. So the second layer of tools we have would be the movement, the crosshair, which moves either the entire layer you are on or whatever is selected, such as this circle. You can move around. You have your magnifying glass, which can zoom in as much as you want. You can hold it down to zoom in further. You can zoom out. It doesn't want me to make that square though. So I guess it's only available with zooming in. Scrubby zoom. With this tool, you can go ahead and rotate your canvas. It will tell you how many degrees it is rotated at angle over here underneath scale. Just like scale will tell you how much you are zoomed in. At this, it is 100%. It goes to 150, then 200, 300, and it zooms in at increments of 100 until it gets much closer. Then it goes at several hundred. This hand just drags your canvas around and lets you travel around in the gray space as much as you want. And this is the color dropper, in which you can get whatever color you want from your canvas. As you can see, the only things on my canvas are black, grays, and white, but it will get you whatever color of whatever pixel you select. Now, when we get into drawing, I already have a sketch to show you. You will line with whatever tool you want down here. You can edit your pen settings through these shapes. This makes it look softer. As you can see, it looks blurrier. This makes it denser. This makes it even denser. And at its most dense, you'll get this, which is, I think, its default setting for your first brush. You have more changes you can make to your brush to make your own custom brush when you're actually using the brush tool and not what I'm using right now, which is the pencil tool. It allows you to change the shape. Right now it's set to simple circle. I can change it to blots and noise, which gives you this rough shape. I'll zoom in closer so you can see. I'll go back to simple circle, and texture allows you to change the texture. This makes it look more like it's on an actual canvas. Texture will change what the brush looks like. Shape will change the shape of the brush. You can change the density of your brush, which will be the opacity it has. If you layer over and over and over, it'll get darker and closer to the color that you actually have selected on the wheel. If it's at 100% density, it will be at its fullest color. You can have minimum density selected, which allows your brush to go through different densities depending on how hard you're pushing with your tablet. If you're using a mouse, it will be default 100% minimum density, even if you have this selected at 0. Minimum size and brush size are exactly the same, only regarding size. Because my minimum size is set to 0%, it will change in size if I'm not pressing hard, completely hard. As you can see, I have pen pressure, which is what affects the size. If I have minimum size unselected, it will just give me one size, which you will see in certain artists' art, either because of stylization or because they do not have pen pressure. Underneath miscellaneous, you'll have several options such as sharpness. And if you aren't aware, sharpness makes something look more crisp and clear. Amplify density, of course, just amplifies the density. And I do not want that on. This allows you to change how hard you need to press for your brush size to change. This means at 200, it means I do not need to press very hard for my brush to be at its full size. If I set it to 0, it will be very small because I need to press very hard for it to get at its full size. I generally have mine set in the middle. There's another option for the same exact thing, but with density. The options underneath it, right here, turn this off. Turn off size and turn off density. I don't have density messed with for my pencil tool because I like the crisp, hard look it has. Now, if you go to, let's find a certain brush tool. If you go to a brush tool, it will give you more options such as blending. This is in Sci 2. In Sci 1, this is available, but not with as many options. Blending, I can turn higher and it will make the colors blend more. Dilution, that just means the color won't show up as much because it is diluted. Persistence will apparently make it disappear. Persistence and dilution seem to do very similar things. I know a lot of people have difficulty blending in Sci 2. This is because there is no longer a blur tool. Well, there is, but it's usually found through filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and it blurs the entire selection, or the entire layer if you don't have a selection. My solution to this was making my own blur brush, which is what Sci 1 has. To do this, I selected the softest brush shape, which is what you get when it looks like this. Along with this, I edited the size to my liking, and then I made the minimum density 100%. Blending, I turned everything up. Blur pressure, I turned 100%. Miscellaneous, I made the smallest, I made density at its highest. I made blending at its highest. Brush size again is custom. So with that, I get a pretty good blur. When it comes to brushes, we have more options, mostly with blending. You have brush size, density, blending, and along with the pencil tool, you have your own shapes, you have your own textures. You can change the intensity of them, such as if I choose blots, it looks like this at 100%. If I want it to look closer to a circle, I can change it to 20%, and it will look like this, which is a mixture of what I had, but less intense. The same thing applies to the texture. Like with this canvas texture, that's at 100%. if I change it to 60 or so, it will be less so. Apart from that, other options you have are clipping group, which I haven't actually learned how to use. You can lock your layer's opacity, which makes sure that all of the pixels on your layer cannot be changed. I can color my lines using this. This makes it more noticeable. This makes sure that I do not have to reline it to get it a certain color. This says it changes the protections for the current layer. I don't personally use that. This doesn't seem to do much when I move my brush around. So I don't use clipping group and I don't use selection source, so I'm sorry, but I won't be able to tell you about those or what they do. Right here, you have transferring this to a layer below it, which just puts what you had on this layer, along with everything that was already on this layer. With this, you have the option to merge your layers, which combines them. With this, you have the option to erase everything on your layer. And with this, you have the option to delete your layer. I personally use erase a lot when sketching. I also lock my layer opacity a lot in order to color my lines and in order to shade certain layers that have already been colored, such as if I'm selecting the hair, I make a layer in order to color it. With this, I don't have to have it selected if I lock my layer opacity. And with that, I can go ahead and shade it as I like while moving my brush around just as much as I want, and it does not escape the colored area in this layer. You can also double click your layers and rename them to whatever you want. You can change your brush size to almost anything, up to 5,000 pixels in Psi 2. And apart from that, I don't have much else to share for Psi. So I hope this was helpful in some way or another. I guess what else I could tell you as a tip is when you're resizing and you want to keep this resolution, this scaling, usually if you resize it, it'll stretch any way you pull it. You can select resize and hold shift in order to keep it the same shape it was before. And I've heard that was a helpful tip. So I hope that or something else in this video helped you. Thank you for watching, and if you have any further questions or you want me to go in further detail about something I've discussed in this, feel free to ask me. I may not have an answer, but I guarantee you I will try to help as best I can. So, thank you.